with the phenomenal success of Henning Mankell, that the books were first made into movies in Swedish, then they were made into movies in England with Kenneth Branagh as the main detective, and it's still pretended that this happened in Sweden, although Kenneth Branagh obviously speaks in a very educated English. And that kind of started off a cottage industry, one can say, where everybody thought that, hey, this is really easy, you just need to take any small town in Sweden, put a serial killer there, put a cop hunting the serial killer, and presto, you'll be a rich man and you can move to Africa and have your own cottage. And so that's what happened, and suddenly, like today, you take any little town in Sweden with a population above 20, 30, it will have its own detective novel series. And these people, these places suddenly attract a lot of tourists, especially from Germany for some reason, but also there are tours in Spanish and Italian and other languages, and English also. We do a tour where you're shown, this is the pizza shop where Wallander in the books eats the pizza that makes him so fat. This is the booze shop where he goes and gets his drink, and this is the house where he doesn't live but he's supposed to live. And you know, people come and look at things that actually are not there, but they've read about it in books and they kind of want to imagine where it is. So it's had this sort of tremendous impact in many different ways, the detective fiction. It's been very good for the Swedish publishing industry, and many of the publishing houses actually fund their entire catalog by publishing a certain number of crime novelists that pay for all the other publishing, the things that don't bring in money, but then the publishers can afford to publish things like poetry and translate books by Indian writers, for instance. Many towns where any form of crime fiction has been set have used it in their tourist brochures and so on. I think even Goa could do something like that, because I believe some of several Bollywood crime things have been set here, and I think even Surendra Mohan Pathak, the Hindi thriller writer, has some stories with set in Goa, so you could do something similar to market it to, if there are such morbid tourists who would want to see fictional crime which is not even real and all.
But if you could just talk a little bit now about your own book, Once Upon a Time in Scandinavistan. This is Zach's book, the Indian edition of it. It's in a way a detective story, but it's a lot more than that. It's a work of speculative fiction based on the idea that Scandinavia and the European Union in general has been colonized by India. And you can imagine the chaos that results. The book unfolds in a place called Gautam Puri.
Chaos, order. Indian Administrative Service comes and administrates everything very orderly.
Yes. I'm sure Zach will be happy to tell you some of the things that happen in the book. But suffice it to say, there's a murder that is committed in the Tandoori Moose restaurant, and the hero, if one can call him that, is a middle-aged, depressive man named Herman Bast, who's a bit like the archetypal heroes of Noah, but also very different in some ways, as you'll discover. What I found most interesting about Scandinavistan is that, about the book, is that here you have a crime story, a detective story, but it's mixed up with other genres. It's got a slapstick comedy, it's got speculative fiction as well. Now, that's something we're not really that used to when it comes to the genre of crime in general. Is that something that's happening in Sweden, or are you treading a lone path?
I think most of the Swedish writers, they follow a fairly strict formula where they more or less copy each other. I mean, they copy somebody who had copied Henning Mankell, or who had copied Kjærvall and Waller. So it's a very in a way, one can speak of it as a school or a tradition, but also it is a very self-referencing form of literature at one point, where everything in a way is the same as the other books that already have been there, because it's been proved by the marketplace that this is what works, and so people write the same kind of things. Like either you have usually you'll have a bit like in my book, in fact, like a slightly elderly male person with cardiovascular problems who has to run after crooks while trying to remember to eat his heart medicine at the same time to keep alive long enough to catch the crook. Likewise, I was thinking, like, when I set out to write this, I didn't really want to write a typical crime novel. I love crime novels I love good crime writing, good crime fiction, good detective stories. I find it really fascinating because it's a form of puzzle that puts your brain to work, and while it entertains, it's also a very good crime novel. Can be as dramatic as the old Greek dramas. As you all know, in the Greek dramas, they all killed each other a lot, and they were basically the first detective. I wanted yet to do something different in the world of crime fiction, and try to reimagine it or experiment with it, and because crime fiction also has its set rule books that you're not really supposed to be funny, for instance, because that will destroy some of the drama and so on. So I just wanted to try to pull off I'd say it's a fairly good literary novel. What do you say?
Yes, of course, it's a great literary novel. You must all head to the shop there and buy it immediately after the session.
I try to look at a kind of Europe which collapses, and you find that the only way to rescue it is to sell it off to the people who actually have the money to run it and to rescue it from a financial crisis, which would be Indian capitalists and Chinese capitalists and various Asian powerful corporations. And so Sweden, of course, because nobody can tell Sweden, Switzerland, it goes in a special discount offer with Germany and is sold off by chance more. But the Swedes themselves are really happy because following the colonization, their economy gets much better. The administration improves because the Indian administrative service is imported to run the country. And you also obviously get better food. You get like idli, sambar, masala dosa, and of course vindaloo and all these kind of things you can get in the restaurants. So suddenly people find that everything has improved, including the food and the culture. And now they're going to colonize. You can hear them. Typical middle-aged, overweight cop who has his blood pressure is higher than his IQ, and his doctor tells him that it should be the other way around. And so he's that classical Swedish fictional cop. But the difficulty in his life becomes this thing that now with the new administration, he has to learn non-violent methods of policing. He has to take workshops in Buddhist meditation. He has to learn how to arrest people without shooting them first. He has to learn how to, improve his health by switching to vegetarian food, which is not really a problem because in the beginning there's a cannibalist crime, so after that he anyway is kind of put off by meat. Like this is a top tip for those of you who have written a manuscript and can't find get a publisher for it. Just put a murder in the beginning and a solution in the end, and you'll get a publisher immediately. In crime fiction, one has to remember that even if one may look down upon it as not as good as serious fiction or as the poetry by the poets who are going to speak in a few minutes after us, it still is an art form or a craft in itself, and the audience for it is fairly demanding. You can't get away with anything, but a reader will immediately tell if you're actually faking the novel or really approaching the craft of or the art of crime fiction as a true craftsman. And thank you all for listening so patiently at our little ramble.